When I was 14 years old, I was a sophomore in high school, and I took my very first journalism class. Now, I stand before you today in my third year of a journalism degree in university, but I hold that that first journalism class that I took was the most important, and it holds a special place in my life. It was taught by a woman named Suzanne Bardwell, and she opened the class with a very simple notion: show, don't tell. And at a base level, what this meant was to use active voice and descriptive language to show readers a scene as opposed to just telling them about it. And as I progressed through my high school journalism career, I started to pursue graphics and visuals as sort of an area of emphasis, and it became my little niche. And I began to realize that show, don't tell didn't just apply to my words. It applied to graphics, it applied to photos, it applied to videos, to all elements that we use to tell stories. And that's what's so important. This show, don't tell was so applicable, but we have to understand that show, don't tell goes a step further. It wasn't just one of those ideas that Suzanne Bardwell had while sitting at her desk at 4 o'clock on an afternoon. It was something that was really applicable in the real wide world of journalism. So if you were to look at the front page of the New York Times the day after we dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, this is what you would have seen. Fairly basic, just text, nothing special. Fast forward to September 12th, 2001. That's not what you would have seen, but what you would have seen is a photo of the Twin Towers immediately after the tragedy happened. Moving forward to earlier this fall, and the Pope came to visit the United States, and you look at the homepage of the New York Times website, and what you would have seen was a wide photo of the Pope greeting people in New York City. What we see is that this idea of show, don't tell is really being applied in the world of journalism, but we can take that a step further. And that's where this idea of interactive data visualization and interactive storytelling really comes in. Because by being interactive, it allows you to engage with your audience on a different level and in a completely different way by interacting with them based on the information that they're receiving in the moment. So this interaction is very important, and the field of journalism has brought us to this point that we are at today. If you think about the beginning, newspaper. Relatively boring, but I love newspaper, so we're gonna start there. Newspaper was fairly simple. We move into radio, and radio became, okay, well, why am I gonna read a newspaper when someone can tell me these things and I can listen on the radio? We move into broadcast, and the question becomes, well, why listen when you can watch? Then the internet comes in and really changes the game, because the internet allows you to do the best of all three of those different platforms in one. You can essentially have a newspaper, a radio, and a broadcast all in one thing in your bed for your convenience. We're still in the internet age, of course, but the things that we do and the way that we tell our stories on that platform can definitely change, and we can implement this idea of interactivity into the different elements that we use as journalists to engage our readers on a completely different level. So the idea really anchors on this notion of your anchoring element. And traditionally, what you see is that with traditional news media, your anchoring element is usually a picture, a video, something very visual, but something relatively short-lived. You have a photo on the front page of a paper, and most people always see the photo on the front page, and that's the extent to which you see a newspaper. That anchoring element is relatively short-lived. What we have to do is change those anchoring elements from being just visual to being interactive. Because by allowing those things to be interactive, you engage your reader at the front end as opposed to on the back end. Traditionally, we see audience engagement as a section in every newsroom, and it's engagement on the back end. After the story's published, you engage the audience via a comment section. And that's really the flaw I see in the system, is that the interaction that comes between a journalist and their readership should be in the information itself. It should be interaction as opposed to engagement after the fact. So the New York Times has an excellent example of interactive data visualization, which deals with a parent's income and the percentage of children who had access to a college education. So if you were to go to the webpage as it existed, this is what you would have seen. This is a basic graph that prompts you to draw the line of what you believe the correlation is between parents' income and the percentage of children who have access to a college education. So I want you to think about it right now. What would you draw as the line that exists between these two different things? The x-axis being parents' income and the y-axis being percentage of children with access to college education and getting that education. So I did exactly what it prompted me to do, and I drew this. Now, what's really unique about this example is the amount of interaction that exists within this element itself. This is what we would call an anchoring element because it exists at the top of the page, and it's the first thing that you're gonna see that should draw you into this story. So after submitting, this is what you're gonna see. The gray line being the actual correlation that exists between these two things, and the second being the line that you drew. So I'm good, but I'm not that good. I know that, and that's okay. That's what this picture tells me, and that's totally good. But we take it a step further with the text response that comes after. What it gives you is 3 basic pieces of information. The first being that you responded better than 93% of the other people who responded to this graph. So that's a piece of information that's specific to you, because if you drew the line differently than I did, that response would have been geared towards you as a reader, interacting with you on a different level than it did with me. The second piece of information that it gives you is that while your line was relatively straight, the fascinating thing about this story is that these two things exist in a linear correlation. That's something that's very anomalous, and that's what the story is here. And that's something that's supposed to pull you into this information at the beginning of the story. The third piece of information is just a joke and kind of moves you into the story itself. Following this is a paragraph of text, photos, videos, all the other traditional news elements that exist as secondary pieces of telling this story. But the anchoring element exists interactively because it's very important to interact with your reader during the information, because that allows you to create an experience with the information that they're receiving. And that allows your reader to really absorb that information in a very different way. We're not throwing 2,000 words at you on a blank page as the first picture that you saw. I'm not just gonna throw those words at you. I'm gonna bring you into the information with a graph that interacts with you. It allows you to bring what you know to the table and take away something that you didn't. You drew what you thought the correlation was, and you got back what the correlation actually is, and shows you why your knowledge isn't necessarily up to par, and how you can better inform yourself, because that's essentially the duty of a journalist, is to inform the populace. And we gotta do that in a very different way. So, moving forward, how do we really do this? How do we execute? It's through those anchoring elements that are gonna be interactive, not just visual, because visuals are very short-lived. How long can you really look at a picture? You can't look at a picture for that long, and that's no guarantee that a person is gonna stay on a web page. People looking at the picture, they look at it, it looks great, and then they leave. That doesn't get anyone more invested in your story than they did looking at a picture that was on the front page of the newspaper. It also doesn't make the platform that is the internet unique at all. You're repurposing the same thing that was on the front page of your paper. It does nothing to bring anything new to your website. These interactive elements are web-specific, and they allow your website to be different than the other products that exist, which creates that uniqueness within the populace as a whole. They see this product as being unique and very branded, and that's what's really important. Now, I think that as college journalists, as collegiate journalists, as I would like to call myself, this is the perfect time for us to implement these sorts of ideals, because we exist in this sort of perfect realm where we are going to class every day, walking to class, going to parties, going to football games with the people that are our readership. But on the back end of that, these people are the exact same age as us, and they've grown up with the technology that we're using to tell our stories right now. If you look at the people who run newsrooms, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the people that run those newsrooms right now, they know how to use these elements, but the people that identify with them in the populace may or may not. And that's where we see a disadvantage, that we have an advantage as collegiate journalists. Also, as collegiate journalists, we don't have millions and millions of dollars worth of debt. We don't have to lay people off. We don't have to worry about whether or not people are gonna click on this page and love what we're doing. It's all about telling the story. It's all about making this an experience for our readers so that they're able to take that information and become informed individuals. So as a journalist, I like to tell stories. I like to disseminate information and inform the populace on things that they may or may not have known. But with that storytelling, the first element that has to exist there is this idea of interaction. Because by interacting with your audience, with your readers during the information, it creates an experience for that information that makes it more memorable after the fact. We have to do away with this idea of engagement after the fact, because what exactly is this engagement with your audience, other than them telling you whether or not they loved or didn't love your story? That doesn't allow them to connect with the information on any different a level than if they were to see it on any other platform. we have the unique opportunity to change the platform that we're using to make it very specific and unique to the people that are using it in the status quo. To journalists like myself, I love to tell stories, and I think that the best way to tell a story is to make your reader a part of it and allow them to experience it.